Hi guys, it's Josh Rubin with Douglas Elliman in New York, live on the Rubin Special today, June 2nd, the day after my 45th birthday. I'm joined by none other than my good friend, Eileen Rivera. Welcome to the Rubin Special, Eileen.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Well, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, because not only are you coaching a lot of our friends and colleagues around the country with our good friend Tom Ferry, but you're also still in production. So, talk to us a little bit about that dynamic, especially over the last couple of months.
It's such a gift. It's complicated at times, a lot of juggling, but it's such a gift because part of the challenge being a realtor is that you get very myopic in your perspective of what's happening in your business and in your own backyard. And I have the great honor and pleasure of coaching and mentoring people in New York City, people in Portland, Oregon, people in Washington State, Kentucky, all over the country. So it gives you a very, very different perspective. And the more you can put all the pieces of the puzzle together, the better equipped we all are to help and guide our buyers and sellers. So
yeah,
that's what I love about it.
You raise a very good point, and that's one of the wonderful things about what I'm doing Monday through Friday and speaking to people like you is we're not just dealing in the vacuum that is New York with its challenges, but we're speaking to people in Irvine, California, Orange County, San Francisco, Dallas, Texas, St. Augustine, Florida, Boston, Massachusetts. And what it's enabling us to do is really, keep perspective, if nothing else, and knowing that there's hope after this and that there is activity in these other cities which have been less impacted by COVID, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And we know that in every city, even yours, my hometown of New York City, as usual, you were ahead.
Right.
You were ahead with trends. Hopefully, you'll be ahead with recovery. But business still happened, right? Very little in New York City, but I know that you and your colleagues were still helping people finish the process that they were in the midst of, and you're back to helping them again. The same thing here in Los Angeles. In all of Southern California, right? Like, we're doing business. And I think one of the most interesting things that high producers, active agents like yourself, Josh, and myself and my team have discovered is it almost made the home buying process more urgent for the people that were in that process. Because in times of uncertainty, in my opinion, the two things that deliver the most certainty are home and family.
Yeah.
Right. So I've seen so many people lean into that, and it's so satisfying to be a part of that process.
Yeah, it really is rewarding to help people navigate both the selling and purchasing of what is not only their largest asset, but something that really means more than any other asset, because it's the place where they're raising their family or spending most of their time, especially in these days of the last couple of months. Which leads us to the next topic, which is that we've spent so much time on this quarantine that it's led to almost this pressure-like atmosphere. And with the recent case of Ahmaud Arbery down in Georgia and George Floyd down in out in Minnesota, it's really led to this almost hyperactive environment, hypersensitive environment. Not just about race, but about controls and various governments and what it's doing to our society. And we really need to be sensitive to that with the people that we speak to. So do you have any insights or wisdom that you might share on that?
Yeah, I do. And I do believe it's wisdom born of 25 years in this business. And that is, we have to listen. Don't go into a meeting. Don't go, whether it's a buyer, a seller, an investor, don't go into a situation assuming that we are all feeling the same way. We all come to the table with a different story. And I firmly believe that it is your obligation, my obligation, to answer questions and facilitate the goals of that other person, right? The outcome is you and I built very successful, productive businesses that help a lot of people. That's the outcome. That's not the process. The process is meeting people where they are and help leading them to where they want to go, whether it's on the buy side or the sell side. And it's different for everyone. What you mentioned, which you were just mentioning a minute ago, what I'm listening to and I'm thinking, and for many, many families in this country, generational wealth started with real estate investment.
Yeah.
And there's a legacy of that. And we have to respect and protect that and honor those people that truly come to us because they trust us and they want us to facilitate their goals.
That's
not
right.
because of our agenda.
No, that's right. And listening is really at the heart of what we do. And that's the beginning of the relationship, and one that is built on a foundation of trust. And so, first and foremost, we need to listen to the people that we're both working with, whether it be clients or colleagues, and understand what the root of the matter is so that we can really help drive the process forward and understand it so that we can all reach a solution that works best for the people that we're listening to.
Absolutely. And again, that's an art, that's a discipline. And you and I have talked about this before. The other step in the process is you have to know when you reach that fine line of you've discovered, and now this is the moment where your expertise and guidance brings so much value to that person, right? And that's when you step in and you lead and you say, oh, I've got this. I can show you how to get from here to there.
Right. And you specifically bring a unique perspective to that process, right? That is because you have made yourself an expert on what we call the DISC profile. So can you talk to us a little bit about that and how you've been able to implement it in your daily interactions with people, and that's enabled you to further help them?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, as a young agent, which was a very long time ago, I wanted to be good enough. I wanted to know enough. I wanted to be the expert, like learn, I'm the pro. And of course, there's market expertise and expertise that you need to gain in the process. Of course, we all need to have that. But then what I fell in love with was understanding people and realizing that you're not going to deal with an engineer the same way that you're going to deal with the kindergarten teacher, right? The facts of the market are not going to change. The facts of your knowledge and expertise are not going to change, but you have to have enough respect and insight to what that person needs to show up and talk to them in their language. So when I meet with, for the longest time, the ones that were really tough with me, and I've had some fabulous clients that are engineers, that are CPAs, that are accountants. I actually had a rocket scientist one time. 15 years ago, and I got so nervous when I researched him, and it was he lived out of the area. He was selling his sister's property in my community, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy's got like 3 masters and 2 PhDs and has actually worked for NASA. It's not a joke. How am I ever going to get this job? And I just researched, and I packaged the data so it's in so many different formats that, first of all, it was a sign of respect, right? To someone who was doing a significant business transaction and had lost someone that they loved and was very close to them. So my prep and how I showed up instantly showed respect, number one. Number two, I provided perspectives in how you view the market differently than the other 3 realtors that he interviewed. Right. So again, my success is less about, oh, I'm so brilliant and I'm so bright and, look at what I've done. And my success is very much attributed to being of service to my consumer.
Yeah. And you raise a good point, because so many people in our position, they might do a CMA, they might not, but it's really about understanding who your customer is, who you're in front of, and how best to package the information, because some of them just want to hear your opinion and they'll go with it depending on the relationship and where they're coming from. Other people, like the proverbial rocket scientist, want to see the black and white and the relevant data and make their own decision. And sure, you can share your opinion, but you need to have the data that supports that opinion. You can't just say, well, I'm going to stick my finger in the air and based on the direction of the wind, I think that you can get, this much for the house. You really have to have the data that supports it. And in some cases, I just spent my entire morning putting together an email to a past client who is a multiple Fortune 100 CEO. I won't get into names or specifics, but he's led a number of multinational financial services firms. And he's a smart guy. Let's put it like that. And I put together an email that not only had my opinion, but also had the data and the 3 sets of data available, pending, and what's recently sold. What's interesting about this is that the recently sold data had a wide range of sales. Price per foot range from a low of 1,700 to a high of 3,600, because his unit is very specific. So you have to include everything that might be, just somewhat relevant. And so I said, here's 3 things within that set that you should be cognizant of. And boom, 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 boom. And so that's why your price is X. And he saw it for what it is. And we're going to be listing his home, in the next couple of weeks for $15 million. It could be as much as 20 million, but it's just not. It's a $15 million home.
Yep. And with your strategy, with the strategy I know that you use and that I use with pricing and protecting our clients, is we know how to go to market to discover what's possible. Right? Instead of going to market to test what we already know is not possible, but the consumer's like, but how close can we get? Well, you want to discover what is possible. We do it this way. We're aggressive, we're strategic, we're multifaceted in our approach. And then we identify what the market can bear. We just had one, it's interesting, not a high-powered CEO like you have, but I have a client right now who we're pretty much at the end of the transaction, and we debated list price. We had a healthy, respectful discussion, and this is a gentleman who's an attorney. He's a dean of a law school. I'm sitting in his house and hearing stories about the 2 chief justices of the United States that he has hosted in his home. That really impressed me. No matter how old I am inside, I'm still the kid from the Bronx, right? I'm the girl from the Bronx. So that's like, whoa, this is impressive. And I'm very comfortable, as I know you are, Josh, telling sellers, this is what I can control. This is what you can control. And then we discover what the market has to say. Because to go in and say, I know, as if I had a crystal ball, is absurd. I know that I have 25 years of experience and I can protect you and I can deliver results. I can't tell you you're going to get 20 million for your apartment versus 15 million, right? That's absurd. Yeah. So.
No, that's right. And anyone that tells you otherwise is just, spitting in the wind. And that person really can't be trusted. So, it comes back to what we were saying earlier about trust being an integral cornerstone of the foundation of what we're trying to do in building these relationships. And a lot of that is based on telling people what they need to hear. It's not necessarily telling them what you think they want to hear.
Right. So because you and I take our jobs, and our profession and our obligation to our client the way a doctor would deal with us. Right? I don't have an MD. You don't have an MD, but you don't tell people when it comes to their physical health or their financial health. Ideally, you tell them the truth and what's possible, not what they want to hear. We're not selling shoes, at the van store where you're selling a $15 million property. Yeah. Right.
So Eileen, you and I are both, we have a mutual admiration and respect for one another. Or longtime friends. And I saw a post that you put up on social media the other day, and you referenced it was when your kids were young, and you referenced back when you were living paycheck to paycheck. Yeah. So can you bring us back to that point?
What specifically? I lived in a very modest house. My husband had a corporate job that provided for our family. We were comfortable. I had 4 young children I was raising. The economy took a hit. He was a product of corporate downsizing.
This was what year approximately?
Oh my gosh. I've been licensed for 25 years. So a long time ago. in the late 90s.
About 25 years ago.
Yeah. Sometime in the 90s, Gary got laid off. and probably early 90s, come to think of it. And, we lived paycheck to paycheck. He got a little severance package. We figured out how long we could stretch that. We did whatever we could to hold on to our house and keep the kids safe and as unaffected for the children as possible. I think most of us do that as parents during hard times.
Yep.
And then, he got a job. We were on our feet again. I got my license, and I was a hobbyist in this business for the first 5 years. I had kids at home, and literally, like, the first time I got a paycheck from selling a little house, probably, I don't know, it's probably 350, 400,000 back in the day. It was like, I'd never seen that much money in one check in my entire life. Okay. I wish I'd been the responsible person that I am now. Actually, I don't know who all is going to watch this, but in our language, Josh, my first sale was a FSBO that I prospected to because I went to a training event, got the listing, sold them a house. Okay. And I don't remember about the buyer. That check was $17,000. It was August. I paid off credit cards. I went Christmas shopping for the kids in August, put everything in big bags. I remember this, in the garage, and hid it. Credit cards. I probably bought myself something, put some money in the bank, and didn't go back to the real estate office until like the next year.
Really? So you did one, maybe two deals, and then
I did. Right. It was a couple deals combined. It was a stat. What I remember is that $17 paycheck, $17,000. It was mind blowing to me, and that's what I mean about being a hobbyist for the first five years or so. I joke that when I got serious about the business, the girls were 13, 15, 17, and 19. Because if you're the mother of 4 teenage daughters, going to work is really fun and exciting.
A little bit of a vacation, right?
Oh, yeah. It's like, all the drama. Dads do better with those teenage years. So, and then I got into coaching and met Tom a long time ago with his previous company. He's changed my life. He's changed your life. He keeps us ahead of everything that's happening in our industry so that we can better serve our clients. So,
no, it's very true. I mean, he's had a dramatic impact on my life and countless others. I mean, yours, Glenda's, a lot of our friends, and a lot of people we don't even know.
Yeah.
Now, what made you sort of hit the switch and go from a hobbyist to saying, I'm going to take this on as a career and build it?
I had a tremendous amount of insecurity. I felt like I didn't have all the degrees and all the credentials that come with being a successful business person. It was like, I'm a good salesperson, but I discovered that my superpower pays really, really well. And my superpowers are that I am empathetic, that the client does come first, and I am now and will be a lifelong student of our industry and every component of it, from the financing end to cap rates and returns and multi-units. There is nowhere in the world, Josh, that you or I couldn't find a great agent that we needed anywhere in the world within an hour because of our network. Right. Yeah. So I leaned into all of those things and then realized that in residential real estate, you're talking about personality. So there's exceptions, you're always going to run into somebody that's really cynical, and no matter what, they're never going to smile. And, that personality type, that's okay. I can work with anybody, but probably a good 85 or 90% of people, if they feel safe with you and they know that your craft, your industry, and you're a consultant, not a salesperson, and you're protecting them, nobody's ever asked to see my PhD or my MBA or any of that. I'd love to have them, no disrespect, but it wasn't required. So I went from that insecurity of who am I to be dealing with people with these big numbers and money, and maybe I should be selling shoes at Nordstrom or something if I want to go into sales. And it was just, it was through experience and then some hunger and fear financially with my family. And, I'm still, there's still room to keep getting smarter. That's the goal.
Yeah. Yeah. I've noticed a reoccurring theme, both in the conversations that I've been having the last couple of months with our friends and just anecdotal evidence of other successful people that I've met in the business. And there's one commonality, and that is fear. And people are afraid of not having enough. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those people come from backgrounds where they didn't have enough, or some period of life where what they had was threatened. In other words, they were afraid of it being taken away. So you mentioned Gary's being laid off. You had this little piece of severance, and you saw this sort of cliff that you're about to go off the end of, and you had to figure it out. And it was that necessity that enabled us to get on the right path for success. So I know I experienced that in 2008. I was in the middle of a renovation. I had 2 lines of credit. I went to an ATM one day. I had $6 left in the ATM in all of my accounts. And I had a house, a mortgage, 2 cars, a wife. At that point, we had 3 kids and 2 cats, and I had $6.
Ooh. Okay? So I have to ask you, I know you're the interviewer, but I have to ask you. So was that the moment? Was that the pinnacle of fear? And then you went into action? Or did you did you curl up for a while before you came out of it?
I never curled up. I just said, well, okay, what are you going to do about it? Oh. Yeah, what are you going to do? Yeah. So what did I do? I got in the ring. I put my gloves on, and I fought like hell. And now I'm one of the most successful realtors in the entire country.
Absolutely.
And so that was my rock bottom, right? And from that point forward, I just said, there's no looking back. There's nowhere to go but up from here, right? Yep. And so what are you going to do? So I went out.
Fear's a great motivator.
Like you, I went out and I prospected FSBOs. I prospected expireds. I said, well, what lead source is free? And I went out and I got a for sale by owner. And that for sale by owner, I did a direct deal on. So I double-ended it, right? Got a low appraisal. Kids spring break 2009. I was in Disney World with my kids, and we got a low appraisal of about 15% below the contract price. And I spent the entire week on the phone with the appraiser fighting the report. And I finally got him to come up to contract value, did the deal, double-ended it. That seller referred me someone else who had been on the market with another broker, was an expired. And I sold that apartment. And at that apartment, I met someone else who in turn, it's funny how we can kind of wireframe our business. Mm-hmm. Like, I met George, he was a FSBO, he referred me to Mark's listing. I met, Tim and Jessica. Jessica referred me to, their friend, who I in turn did I did a $10 million deal and a $7.5 million deal. And like, from then on, it's just like, it's like a rocket ship, right? And it's just incredible what we can do. And what is that affects our success? Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, if we distill it all down, what is it? It's one thing. It's mindset, right? Mm-hmm. And so I could have curled up in a ball and said, holy shit, I have $6 in the bank and actually more than that at that point. I had $500,000 in debt between my mortgage, my line of credit, and the 2 other credit lines that I had. And I had $6 in hard currency, right? So I could have said, oh my God, forget it. I'm going to fold up the tent and pack it in and go, but what did I do? I kept on digging, right? And only then did I hit pay dirt. So I would say for all of us who are struggling in these times, and I know the majority of the agents out there are struggling because we haven't been able to show homes. There's a lot of uncertainty, but keep on digging because there's a light at the end of this tunnel.
Absolutely. And, listening to you in that process that you went through, on vacation, taking downtime with the kids and the family, yet so committed to the business. In our industry, we see all types, right? We see people that have left really successful careers for one reason or another to come into real estate. And they're every age and every ethnicity, every weight, every height. And I am a true believer, for the realtors listening to this, for any salesperson listening to this, nothing outperforms work ethic. Nothing. You can be talented, you can have resources, you can be, pretty or handsome or look like you came off a movie set. If you are not disciplined and consistent, you will never build a business. You'll ride the roller coaster of real estate your entire life.
Right, because they'll be like you, getting that $17,000 check. Holy shit, I got a $17,000 check, I'm rich. You're starting the whole year over again, like, oh boy, so.
Or like you getting over encumbered. I bet since then, is it fair? Because I don't really know. Is it fair to say that you became fiscally more conservative? Not that you don't do investments, not that you don't do projects, but have you ever again put yourself in that vulnerable of a situation?
No, not to that degree. I mean, right. I never expected 2008 to unroll the way that it did. And, when I committed to this renovation and the lines of credit, and, they were just there as like safety nets. And the next thing you know, I was literally living paycheck to paycheck. I was maxed out on every credit facility I had, just paying the minimums off. And like, wow, it was crazy. I mean, it was basically financial suicide, right? But I got through it. I paid off all the debt, lived in that house for a few years, put a couple good years together, was able to move to the other side of town to a house that I had always admired from afar, but I wound up being able to buy it and just when it was starting to take off again. I took advantage of the recession because of my mindset and able to put 2009 and 2010 and 11 together. And then in 2012, this opportunity presented itself. So it worked out really, really well. So after 25 years in the business, Eileen, and the first few years, you're sort of a hobbyist. And then, you put your, sort of your proverbial construction hat on, and you got to work. What was one deal that sort of stands out to you as being the most memorable?
Oh my goodness. I have several, and I would say that they're situational. Some taught me about the business, some taught me about people, and some taught me about myself. So the ones that taught me about myself was when I listened to who I am, my wiring of being of service and nurturing, because I used to think, oh, that's not professional, right? Like, you don't love on sellers, you don't this, you don't that. And in the neighborhood that I live in, that I do a lot of work in, I've met people in serious crisis. And I lead with my humanity. It's not a strategy. It's just being comfortable with this is who I am and reading the people, if that's invited, if that's appropriate, and leaving that appointment or closing that transaction and knowing that these human beings, this family, are a chapter in the story of my life, not just my business, and suspecting that it's vice versa. It's not every deal. I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of transactions, but there's a few of those that sit with me. The ones that have taught me the most are the ones that I thought I had absolutely no chance of being the person chosen, and I was. And then I thought, okay, I'm one of the things I teach my team and in our industry is every transaction that you do, every time you present, I don't care if you're a brand new licensee or if you're Josh Rubin, I think that you need to stop at the end of that transaction or at the end of that meeting and in writing recap, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? What surprised me? What else could I have done? And if you, at our level, maybe not every time, but I think periodically we have to do that because that's how we raise the bar of what we deliver to our clients. So those are the memorable ones, like the emotional ones. And then the ones where I thought, wait, they're actually interviewing 8 agents. Like, who does that? Who has that kind of time? You know, and it's a multi-million-dollar listing and a product in a city where I've never sold anything. I've been there twice. We sold a property, a multi-million-dollar historic property on Catalina Island, which New Yorkers probably just know from a Beach Boys song or something. But it was like we got the listing. Like, we nailed it. They loved us. It was a perfect transaction. They couldn't believe the marketing plan that we had designed for them. And it was like, okay, at some point I have to own that I'm good at this, right? Humility is great and it's how I'm wired. But I also had to realize I'm really good at this.
Yeah, this is your moment. You've come to this point where not only are you in consideration, but you are likely the most qualified person for this job.
And it was earned, right? You and I couldn't say that 25 years ago. I didn't just show up and was great. I skinned my knees, right? I fell a lot of times. I wasn't that person ever, that kid that got on the two-wheeler and just took off. Right. I have a history of skinning my knees, but I learned.
Yeah.
I learned. So yeah, I love it. I love the ones that teach me. I think those are, how about you? Can I ask you that question? Are there any that are particularly memorable in terms of the surprise or the lesson?
I did a deal recently with Anthony Morris from Corcoran. And it was one that just felt natural. Like, everything lined up just perfectly. I knew that he was the listing agent, so we were going to be treated with respect. And I knew that, it was going to be a house that was better fitting to the client's needs rather than the house that they had negotiated on previously that didn't work out. And we walked in and it just felt like a pair of comfortable shoes when you step into the house. And it just worked out perfectly. It happens to be a deal that I did in the last year, but it really worked well, and everybody's very happy with it. And we got it at a good price, and it was in good condition, great location for these young women that bought it. So everybody's happy, and it's just one of those. It's one of those deals that it wasn't necessarily easy getting to that point, but once we got to it, everything just felt,
comfortable,
right at home. For lack of a better way to describe it. And so, that felt good. That was a past client who was purchasing a house for his two daughters to live in. It was sort of like a 2 or 3 family. And, Rachel's going to have one apartment, Zoe's going to have the other. So that was one that just felt good. There was another one a number of years ago, believe it or not, where I was still living in Brooklyn. And I had these friends who were a couple, and they were sort of quirky. And I looked at the house around the corner, and I would always admire this house. And there was this movie that came out, and it was called The Royal Tannenbaums. And this couple kind of reminded me of the Royal Tannenbaums, this sort of quirky family. And they called me up one day and said, Josh, we want to get out of the West Village. And so I said, okay. They said, yeah, it's just become too trendy, and we liked it because it was super gritty, and now it's just become this homogenous sort of mollified neighborhood, and we want to get out. We want to move to Brooklyn. I said, okay, great. So we drove around all of Brooklyn looking for a house, and we came close to one and then close to another, and then this house that came up, and it happens to be right next door to this house that was used for the exterior shot of the Royal Tannenbaums house.
Okay.
And it was uncanny. It happens to have been right around the corner from where I was living. And we went in, we saw it, and all of us had this light bulb go off over our head, like, oh my God, this is the house. And it was the one, but it had just come on. We made an offer right away, but they didn't want to respond to it. We said, we want to have our open house this Sunday. We were like, oh shit, we're not going to get this. It's going to go into multiple bids. And then Mother Nature took over, and Mother Nature put a snowstorm right on top of their open house. And so no one came. And ours was the only offer that came in. And the seller said, okay, great, you have a deal. And so we bought it. Yeah. And so, everything just came together. And so Charles and Tanya still live there today. And, everybody's happy. So, things just work out the way that they're meant to. Sometimes, there's a saying in our business that we get frustrated when we don't get a listing. But then we look back on it and we realize, oh, there were title issues, there were termite issues, some foundation issues. The house never sold. The seller was crazy. And so there's a saying that sometimes the listings that we don't get are the best listings, right?
Absolutely.
And so when things don't work out to our advantage, there's usually a reason. There's a higher power. So,
Yes.
there's a lot to be said for that.
I
So,
share that with buyers and sellers. One of from the perspective of with the attorney that I was just telling you the story about. It's like, again, this is what I can control. This is what you can control, right? You can't control the snowstorm, but it served your client, right? It worked out for the best.
right.
And it's ridiculous to try and sell someone. And you and I have seen it. We've talked about it with some folks in our profession, where it's like the constant tap dance and two-step. It's like, no, just be a vehicle to accuracy and to facts and to knowledge and to insight, right? I'm not selling shoes at Nordstrom. I don't even know if they're going to open again, by the way, but
just the facts.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's an important, lesson to learn. It's just, don't get emotional. Just focus on the reality of the situation and help people get through it and understand that, there is something beyond the stress that they're feeling in the course of the process of the transaction, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, Eileen, is there anything that you'd like to leave us with today? Any morsel that, because everybody's so on edge with everything that's going on, with the riots and the looting that's happening across the country, and coming out of this pandemic with COVID-19, it seems to almost be a distant memory now, given that everybody's focus is turning on to the protests. But there must be something, because I know you're not only extraordinarily intelligent, but you're super warm and in touch with humanity.
Yeah, I think that's a space that we need to be in, is our humanity. And when you look at some of the atrocities that have been committed, look back at history and some of the atrocities that kids study in school, it's like some of that, my grandkids or my grandkids' kids will study someday because of what's happening now. It's so sad. It's so heartbreaking. And each and every one of us has the opportunity to be in the world and be a light and not fuel that fire and not talk like we're experts, but talk like we're family, a family that's a community on our teams with our clients. Just really try to stay out of judgment, stay safe, and be out there and be your best self. Stop effing, I'm not going to say it, even though, I don't know, we're with a bunch of New Yorkers, I probably could. Stop effing judging. I have an enormous advantage in my career because I was born and raised in New York City. My father in the 60s and 70s was a successful jeweler on 47th Street between 5th and 6th. And I grew up hearing my parents talk at the table. I don't have that area it's not even as attractive the last time I was there as it was when I was a kid. Maybe it's, my memories are a little enhanced. Yep. But one of the lessons in my home as a daughter of immigrants who, came over before the Bay of Pigs, my parents were both born in Cuba, but then did bring their family, their siblings and their parents over. There were a lot of lessons at the dinner table. And a huge one was, didn't even understand it, but as a very young child, I knew that my father was the only non-Hasidic jeweler on 47th Street that the Hasidic community dealt with.
Huh.
Right? It was like, it was a point of pride and honor for him that he had developed that reputation of trust and integrity and intelligence, that there were things that he had opportunities to do because of the respect that others did not. And it was an early life lesson, didn't know it at the time, of treat everybody with respect, be your best self. If you're going to point the finger, make sure it's you're pointing it at. Yeah. So, I mean, I know it's really basic, but it's like, there's just not enough of it out there. I feel a little naive. Like, I'm really disheartened by how much ugliness still exists.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And, I've been preaching this ever since I was a kid. When I was 13, I wrote an entire bar mitzvah speech. In fact, it was a benai mitzvah, meaning that my bar mitzvah was paired along with another girl who I was friends with from elementary school. and we were both bar and bat mitzvah together.
Uh-huh.
So it was her family and friends who I really didn't know, and my family and friends, approximately 200 people.
Wow.
And I decided I was going to write a speech about racism. 13 years old.
Really?
Yeah. And so, I've been preaching this since I was even younger than that, because one of the greatest teachers I ever had was Mrs. Weldon in the first grade. And I used to come home speaking very highly of her. And she was, she really touched me. My parents went in for the parent teacher conferences, and they came out and they said, "Oh, Josh, Mrs. Weldon, it says you're great and you're doing really well." And my father, who came out of, the tensions of the 50s, 60s, et cetera, and he grew up in inner city Philadelphia, but he commented that he was surprised by the fact that I never mentioned that she was a Black woman, because it was never an issue for me, and it still isn't. And so today,
Right. Yep.
I'm effectively married to a Black woman, by the way, who's from
Yep.
Trinidad, and
Yes.
race has never been an issue for me. So to
Yep.
grow up in this society where there's still racial tensions today is really remarkable, because, like you said, we need to stop judging people and we need to start loving one another. Right?
100%. And you can dislike and the idiots out there, right? I'm not saying that there's not evil and there's not bad people, but we have to stop painting society with a broad stroke, right? It's not, you can't do it. You can't do it. You felt that way in your childhood. I grew up in New York in the 60s and 70s. I felt exactly the same way. Growing up in New York City, the daughter of immigrants, and going from, my dad used to say I was his lucky charm, right? Because my siblings, I was the oops baby, okay? So my siblings are 8, 10, and 12 years older than I am. And they remember struggling. And I know the story that when I was brought home from, I think it was called Women's Hospital in Manhattan, I came home to an apartment in Harlem, right? But my father started building his business and his success and doing the things you and I have done in our careers. And I cannot believe what a gift it was growing up in New York City with all of the diversity, with all of the challenges that our family had, with all the triumphs that they had. Like, it doesn't even and I know a lot of people don't get what you and I are saying, but like, it doesn't even occur to me to judge someone because of the color of their skin, their accent, or their age, right? Like, I'll judge, like, really? You're being rude to that checker? They're like 17 and they're helping you and you're being an ass? I'm going to judge you.
Right. Or their sex, right?
Yes. I know a lot of really badass men and women of all age or sexual persuasion. No, it's absurd. I don't get it, but it's everywhere.
I had the opportunity, Eileen, in the course of our business, to meet Patricia Arquette, who is, of course, an Oscar and SAG Award-winning actress. And Patricia made a speech a couple of years ago at the SAG Awards when she won, about equality and pay within Hollywood. And it really touched a nerve with me, because I was raised by a single mother. So when I met her within 5 minutes, I had to tell her that her speech really resonated with me. And that, I think she found that remarkable, that someone was actually listening to her, and B, 2 or 3 years later, someone actually remembered it enough to make a comment to her. So, with that, Eileen, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your hectic schedule between your production and your coaching clients. Always a pleasure to spend time with you and have you grace us with your intelligence and perspective. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anything. I'm always here if you need me.
Eileen Rivera, everybody, from Irvine, California, with Rivera Group. Thanks again.
Long Beach, California.